When Dr. Sarah Chun heard the screech of tires outside her small clinic that rainy Tuesday evening, she thought it was just another accident on the busy street. She never imagined that the man bleeding on her doorstep would be Admiral James Morrison, one of the Navy's most decorated officers. And she certainly never expected that saving his life would make her the target of a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of government. What started as a simple act of medical compassion would thrust Sarah into a world of classified secrets, government cover-ups, and deadly pursuit. The black SUVs that appeared outside her clinic the next morning were just the beginning. Someone wanted the Admiral dead, and now they wanted Sarah's silence too. This is the true story of how one woman's decision to help a stranger changed everything, and how sometimes doing the right thing can put your entire life in danger. Dr. Sarah Chun wiped the sweat from her forehead as she finished updating the last patient file of the day. Her small community clinic in downtown Seattle had been busier than usual, with the flu season hitting hard and several families bringing in their children with high fevers. The clock on her desk read 8:47 p.m., and she was looking forward to going home to her quiet apartment and a hot cup of tea. The rain had been falling steadily all day, creating a rhythmic drumming on the clinic's windows. Sarah loved the sound of rain. It reminded her of her childhood in Portland, where she first decided she wanted to become a doctor. She had opened this clinic 3 years ago, determined to serve the community that couldn't always afford expensive hospital visits. The work was challenging and the pay wasn't great, but seeing families get the care they needed made every long day worth it. As she gathered her things and prepared to lock up, Sarah heard a loud crash outside. The sound of metal hitting metal, followed by the screech of tires, made her heart skip a beat. Living in the city, she had heard plenty of car accidents, but this one sounded particularly violent. She rushed to the window and peered through the rain-streaked glass. A black sedan had crashed into a light pole about 50 feet from her clinic. Steam was rising from the crumpled hood, and the driver's side door hung open at an odd angle. Sarah grabbed her medical bag without thinking and ran toward the door. Her training had kicked in automatically, the same way it had during her residency when she worked in the emergency room. The rain soaked through her scrubs within seconds as she ran toward the wreck. The street was surprisingly empty for a Tuesday evening, with most of the shops already closed and traffic light due to the weather. As she got closer, she could see a figure slumped over the steering wheel, not moving. "Sir, can you hear me?" she called out as she approached the car. The man appeared to be in his 50s, well-dressed in what looked like a military uniform, though it was hard to tell with all the blood. There was a deep gash on his forehead, and his breathing was shallow and labored. Sarah carefully checked his pulse and breathing. His heartbeat was irregular and weak, and she noticed his pupils were uneven when she shone her penlight into his eyes. These were signs of serious head injury, possibly a concussion or worse. She also noticed that his left arm was bent at an unnatural angle, clearly broken. "We need to get you inside," she said, even though the man seemed unconscious. "Can you only walk? I have a clinic right across the street." To her surprise, the man's eyes fluttered open. "No hospitals," he whispered urgently, gripping her arm with surprising strength for someone in his condition. "Please, no hospitals. They'll find me." Sarah was taken aback by the fear in his voice. In her years of practice, she had seen patients afraid of medical bills or worried about immigration status. But this was different. This man seemed genuinely terrified of being found. "Sir, you have serious injuries. You need proper medical care," she explained gently. "I can take you to Harborview Medical Center. It's only 10 minutes away." "No," he said more forcefully, trying to sit up and wincing in pain. "Listen to me, doctor. I can see from your coat that you're medical. I need help, but I can't go to a hospital. People are trying to kill me." Sarah studied his face carefully. Despite the blood and obvious pain, his eyes were clear and focused. He didn't seem delusional or confused, just desperate and afraid. She noticed now that his uniform had insignia she didn't recognize, and there was something about his bearing that suggested military training. "What's your name?" she asked, helping to support his weight as he struggled to get out of the car. "Morrison," he replied. "Admiral James Morrison, U.S. Navy. And if I'm right about what's happening, both our lives are in danger now." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain. She had no idea who this man really was or what kind of trouble he was in, but her medical oath was clear. He needed help, and she was capable of providing it. The moral choice was simple, even if the consequences might be complicated. "My clinic is right there," she said, pointing across the street. "I can treat your injuries, but if you're as badly hurt as you look, you're going to need more than I can provide in a small clinic." The Admiral nodded grimly. "I understand the risks, doctor, but right now, your clinic is safer than any hospital in the city. I'll explain everything once we're inside." Sarah helped him across the street, supporting most of his weight as he limped heavily. His breathing was becoming more labored, and she was worried about internal injuries. As they reached the clinic door, she noticed a black SUV driving slowly down the street with its headlights off. It was moving too slowly for normal traffic, almost as if the driver was looking for something. She unlocked the clinic door quickly and helped the Admiral inside, immediately locking the door behind them. As she flipped on the lights, she could see the full extent of his injuries. In addition to the head wound and broken arm, there were what looked like bullet holes in his uniform jacket. "Oh my God," she breathed. "You've been shot." Admiral Morrison nodded weakly as she helped him onto an examination table. "3 times. Vest stopped 2 of them, but one got through my shoulder. That's why I crashed. Lost too much blood, passed out at the wheel." Sarah's hands moved quickly and efficiently as she began to assess his wounds. The bullet wound in his shoulder was still bleeding, but it had missed the major arteries. The head injury was concerning, but his pupils were responding normally to light now. The broken arm would need to be set and immobilized. "Who shot you?" she asked as she began cleaning the bullet wound. "And why can't you go to a hospital?" The Admiral was quiet for a moment, studying her face. "Doctor, what I'm about to tell you is classified information. By helping me, you're already in more danger than you know. But you deserve to understand what you're getting into." Sarah paused in her work. "I'm listening." 3 days ago, I discovered that someone in the Navy's upper command structure is selling classified submarine technology to foreign agents. I have evidence, documents that prove the whole operation. I was on my way to meet with FBI contacts when my car was ambushed. "The people who shot you, they're military?" Sarah asked, continuing to work on his shoulder. "I don't know for certain, but they knew my route and my security protocols. This conspiracy goes deep, probably involves people I've worked with for years. That's why I can't trust anyone in official channels right now." Sarah absorbed this information as she finished cleaning and bandaging his wounds. The situation was far more serious than she had imagined. She was harboring a military officer who claimed to have evidence of a major conspiracy, and apparently people were willing to kill to stop him. "The documents," she said. "Where are they now?" Admiral Morrison managed a slight smile despite his pain. "Safe. Hidden somewhere even I can't access right now. Insurance policy. If something happens to me, they'll still be found." As Sarah worked to set his broken arm, she found herself thinking about the black SUV she had seen outside. Had been looking for the Admiral? Were they being watched right now? She had always lived a quiet, predictable life focused on her work and her patients. The most excitement she usually faced was a complicated diagnosis or a difficult patient. "Admiral, I need to ask you something," she said as she applied a temporary splint to his arm. "Are you telling me the truth? Because if you are, then helping you might be the most dangerous thing I've ever done." He looked directly into her eyes. "Dr. Chun, I wish I could tell you this was all a mistake or a misunderstanding. But the truth is, by saving my life tonight, you've probably put your own life at risk. These people don't leave witnesses, and they don't take chances." Sarah finished her work in silence, her mind racing. She had always believed in doing what was right, regardless of the personal cost. But she had never faced a situation where doing the right thing might literally get her killed. As she cleaned up her medical supplies, she tried to process everything the Admiral had told her. "What happens now?" she finally asked. "Now we figure out how to stay alive until I can get those documents to someone we can trust," Morrison replied. "And we hope that the people looking for me don't realize you helped me." As if on cue, Sarah heard the sound of car doors slamming outside. She moved carefully to the window and peered through the blinds. 3 black SUVs had pulled up in front of her clinic, and men in dark suits were getting out of each vehicle. Even in the dim streetlight, she could see that they were armed. "Admiral," she whispered urgently, "I think it's too late for hoping." Morrison struggled to sit up on the examination table, his face grim. "Dr. Chun, is there a back exit to this building?" "Yes, through the supply room. It leads to an alley behind the building." "Good. We need to move now. These men aren't here to ask questions." Sarah's hands were shaking as she grabbed her medical bag and helped the Admiral down from the table. Everything was happening so fast that she could barely process it all. Just an hour ago, her biggest concern had been getting home before the rain got worse. Now she was apparently fleeing for her life with a wounded military officer who claimed to have evidence of a government conspiracy. As they made their way toward the back of the clinic, Sarah could hear voices outside the front door. The men weren't trying to be quiet anymore, which probably meant they knew their target was inside. She heard what sounded like lockpicks being used on her front door. "Doctor," Admiral Morrison whispered as they reached the supply room, "I want you to know that I'm sorry. You shouldn't have gotten involved in this." "I'm not sorry," Sarah replied, surprising herself with her certainty. "If what you're saying is true, then stopping these people is more important than my safety." They slipped out the back door into the dark alley, just as Sarah heard her front door open. Footsteps echoed through her clinic as the men began searching the building. Admiral Morrison was moving slowly due to his injuries, but adrenaline was keeping him going. "Where can we go?" Sarah asked as they made their way through the alley. "Somewhere public. These people prefer to work in private. A hotel, restaurant, anywhere with crowds and witnesses." They emerged from the alley onto a side street, just as Sarah heard shouting from inside her clinic. The men had discovered they were too late. Within minutes, those same men would be searching the surrounding area. As they walked quickly down the street, Admiral Morrison explained their situation. "Dr. Chun, you have 2 choices now. You can go to the police, tell them everything that happened, and hope that they can protect you. Or you can help me get those documents to the right people and make sure this conspiracy is exposed." Sarah thought about her quiet life, her patience, her comfortable routine. All of that was gone now, whether she helped the Admiral or not. The people who had shot him would never believe that she didn't know anything about his secrets. Her involvement was no longer optional. "What do those documents prove exactly?" she asked. "That Admiral Richard Hawthorne, the Navy's Deputy Chief of Naval Operations, has been selling submarine sonar technology to Chinese intelligence for the past 2 years. The technology they're buying could give them the ability to track our nuclear submarines anywhere in the Pacific." The implications hit Sarah immediately. This wasn't just about military secrets or money. This was about national security, about the safety of military personnel, about the balance of power in one of the world's most volatile regions. "How much evidence do you have?" "Bank records, communication intercepts, technical specifications, photographs. Enough to convict him and roll up his entire network. But only if it gets to the right people." They had been walking for 10 minutes now, and Sarah could see that Admiral Morrison was struggling. His shoulder wound was bleeding again, and the exertion was taking its toll. They needed to find shelter soon, somewhere he could rest, and she could properly treat his injuries. "There's a small hotel about 6 blocks from here," she said. "It's family-owned, not part of any chain. The kind of place that doesn't ask too many questions as long as you pay cash." "Perfect. But, Dr. Chun, once we get there, there's no going back. If you help me from this point on, you'll be considered just as much of a threat as I am." Sarah looked at this wounded man who had stumbled into her life and changed everything. She thought about the oath she had taken as a doctor, about her responsibility to help people and to do no harm. But she also thought about her responsibility as a citizen, about the sailors whose lives might depend on stopping this conspiracy. "Admiral," What's the worst that could happen if those submarine plans get to the wrong people? Morrison's expression was grave. American submarines could be sitting ducks. Crews could die. The entire naval deterrent in the Pacific could be compromised. We could be looking at the beginning of a hot war. That settled it for Sarah. Whatever happened to her personally, she couldn't live with herself if she walked away and people died because of it. She had saved the Admiral's life for a reason, and maybe that reason was bigger than either of them had initially understood. Then we'd better make sure those documents get to the right people, she said firmly. As they approached the hotel, Sarah realized that her life, as she knew it, was over. But for the first time since this whole crisis began, she felt certain that she was doing the right thing. Whatever came next, she would face it with the knowledge that she had chosen to stand up for what was right, even when it was dangerous. The small hotel lobby was dimly lit and nearly empty except for an elderly clerk behind the desk. Sarah paid for a room with cash, while Admiral Morrison waited in the shadows near the entrance. As they made their way to their room, both of them knew that the most dangerous part of their journey was just beginning. The people hunting them wouldn't give up easily, and they had resources that Sarah couldn't even imagine. But they also had something their pursuers didn't expect: determination, evidence of the truth, and the element of surprise. Sometimes that was enough to change everything. The hotel room was small and sparse, with faded wallpaper and furniture that had seen better days. But it was clean and, more importantly, anonymous. Sarah helped Admiral Morrison onto the bed and immediately began checking his bandages. The bleeding had stopped, but he was still pale and clearly in pain. "I need to clean that shoulder wound properly," she said, opening her medical bag. "And you should probably take something for the pain." Morrison shook his head. "I need to stay alert. There's too much at stake." Sarah studied his face in the lamplight. Despite everything they had been through in the past few hours, he seemed more focused now than when she had first found him. "Admiral, you mentioned that you hid the evidence somewhere safe. How do we get to it?" "It's complicated," he replied, wincing as Sarah cleaned his wound with antiseptic. "I couldn't risk keeping the documents on me or in any obvious location. I gave them to someone for safekeeping, someone who doesn't know what they contain." "Ooh." Morrison was quiet for a moment, as if weighing how much to reveal. "My daughter, Emily. She's a graduate student at the University of Washington. I told her I was giving her some old family documents to keep safe. She thinks they're letters from her grandfather's military service." Sarah felt a chill of concern. "Admiral, if these people are willing to kill you for those documents, what makes you think your daughter is safe?" "Because they don't know about her yet," he replied. "Emily, and I haven't spoken in 2 years. She changed her last name back to her mother's maiden name after our relationship fell apart. There's no official connection between us that they could easily find." The pain in Morrison's voice when he talked about his daughter was obvious. Sarah could sense there was a deeper story there, but now wasn't the time to explore family dynamics. "How do we contact her without putting her in danger?" "Very carefully. Emily is smart and cautious. She got that from her mother. If I can get a message to her through a secure channel, she'll know how to respond." Sarah finished treating his shoulder and helped him into a more comfortable position. "What kind of secure channel?" "I assume regular phone calls are out of the question." Morrison pulled a small, encrypted cell phone from his jacket pocket. Sarah was surprised it had survived the car crash intact. This phone uses military-grade encryption and bounces signals through multiple satellites. It should be safe for 1 or 2 brief calls. "Should be. Dr. Chun, in this business, nothing is ever completely safe. But this is the best option we have." Sarah watched as Morrison powered up the phone and began composing a text message. His fingers moved slowly due to his injuries, but his expression was focused and determined. She found herself wondering about his relationship with his daughter, about what had driven them apart, and whether this crisis might somehow bring them back together. "What happened between you and Emily?" she asked gently. Morrison paused in his typing and looked up at her. "Her mother died in a car accident 3 years ago. Emily blamed me, said I was never around when the family needed me, too focused on my career to be a real husband and father. She wasn't wrong. The regret in his voice was unmistakable. Sarah had seen this kind of pain before in her patients, the weight of missed opportunities and words left unsaid. But you're trying to protect her now. It's probably too little, too late. But yes, I'm trying to protect her. And not just from the people who are hunting me. If this conspiracy goes as deep as I think it does, and if Admiral Hawthorne realizes how much evidence I have, he might decide that eliminating witnesses is his only option. Sarah felt the full weight of their situation settling over her. It wasn't just about exposing corruption anymore. It was about preventing more violence, protecting innocent people, and stopping what could become a much larger tragedy. Morrison finished his message and showed it to Sarah before sending it. This is urgent. Meet me at the place where we used to get ice cream when you were 10. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. Come alone and bring the envelope I gave you last year. Important family business. Love, Dad. Will she understand that? Sarah asked. Emily has a good memory, and she knows I never contact her unless something's seriously wrong. She'll come. They spent the next hour planning their approach. The ice cream shop Morrison had referenced was in the University District, a busy area with lots of foot traffic and multiple escape routes. Sarah would accompany him, posing as a friend or colleague. They would retrieve the documents, verify their contents, and then figure out how to get them to someone in law enforcement they could trust. It sounded simple enough, but Sarah knew that the most dangerous part would be the waiting. The people hunting them would be expanding their search, checking hospitals, hotels, anywhere Morrison might have gone for help. It was only a matter of time before they started looking at every medical facility in the city, including small clinics like hers. Admiral, I have a question that might sound selfish, Sarah said as she settled into the room's single chair. What happens to my life after all this is over? Assuming we survive, I mean. Morrison considered her question seriously. That depends partly on how this plays out. If we can expose the conspiracy and get Hawthorne arrested, you'll probably be safe. He'll be too busy defending himself to worry about eliminating witnesses. But if he stays free and powerful, then I'll spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. I'm afraid so. Dr. Chun, I meant what I said earlier. I'm sorry you got pulled into this. If there was any way to keep you safe while still stopping Hawthorne, I would take it. Sarah was quiet for a moment, processing the reality of her situation. Her medical practice was probably finished, regardless of what happened. Even if they succeeded in exposing the conspiracy, the kind of people who would come after her wouldn't stop just because their boss was in prison. She would likely need a new identity, a new location, possibly a new profession. Can I ask you something personal, Admiral? Under the circumstances, I think we're past formality. Call me James. James, what made you decide to investigate Admiral Hawthorne in the first place? What made you risk everything? Morrison leaned back against the headboard, his expression thoughtful. 6 months ago, one of my junior officers came to me with concerns about unusual communication patterns he had noticed. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Park, brilliant officer, great instincts. She had been monitoring routine intelligence traffic and noticed that classified submarine specifications were being accessed more frequently than normal, often outside regular working hours. Sarah noticed the admiration in his voice when he talked about Lieutenant Commander Park. Did you investigate her concerns? I did, but quietly. What I found was worse than either of us had imagined. Not just occasional security breaches, but a systematic program of information theft going back at least 2 years. Bank records showing large deposits in Hawthorne's personal accounts that coincided with intelligence transfers. Communication logs showing contacts with known foreign agents. And Lieutenant Commander Park? Is she safe? Morrison's expression darkened. Sarah Park died in what was officially ruled a training accident 2 weeks ago. Her submarine experienced a catastrophic system failure during a routine exercise. No survivors. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. They killed her. I can't prove it, but yes, I believe they killed her and her entire crew to cover up what she had discovered. 37 sailors died to protect Hawthorne's secret. Sarah felt sick. She had been thinking of this as a matter of national security and personal safety, but now she understood the human cost. Real people had already died because of this conspiracy, and more would die if they didn't stop it. That's when you decided to gather evidence against Hawthorne. That's when I decided I couldn't let Sarah Park's death be meaningless. She died trying to protect her country, and I owe it to her memory to finish what she started. They spent the rest of the night taking turns sleeping and keeping watch. Sarah found it almost impossible to rest, despite her exhaustion. Every sound in the hallway made her heart race. Every car that passed outside the window could be their hunters closing in. Around dawn, Morrison's encrypted phone buzzed with a response from his daughter. "Dad, I'll be there. Are you in trouble? Should I call someone?" "Eminencia." Morrison showed the message to Sarah before responding. "Everything will be explained tomorrow. Don't tell anyone about our meeting. Trust me one more time." "Will she?" Sarah asked. "I hope so. Emily is the only family I have left, and I've already lost her once because of my choices. I can't lose her again." The morning passed slowly. They ordered room service breakfast, paying cash and keeping the curtains drawn. Sarah used the time to check Morrison's injuries again and was pleased to see that everything was healing well. His shoulder was still painful, but the bleeding had stopped and there were no signs of infection. Around noon, they began preparing for the meeting with Emily. Morrison changed into civilian clothes that Sarah had purchased from the hotel's gift shop, and they reviewed their plan one more time. The ice cream shop was in a busy shopping district near the university, with multiple exits and good visibility of the surrounding area. If something goes wrong, Morrison told Sarah, "Don't try to be a hero. Get away from the scene as fast as you can and go to the FBI field office downtown. Ask for Agent Jennifer Walsh and tell her everything you know." "What about you?" "I'll handle myself." "But Dr. Chun, Sarah, you've already done more than anyone had a right to ask. You've saved my life and helped me get this far. That's enough." Sarah shook her head firmly. "I'm seeing this through to the end. Those 37 sailors on Lieutenant Commander Park's submarine, they deserve justice. And your daughter deserves to have her father come home safe." At 2:30 p.m., they left the hotel and made their way toward the university district. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still overcast and threatening. Sarah found herself constantly checking their surroundings, looking for anything out of place, anyone who might be watching them. The ice cream shop was busy with the afternoon crowd, mostly students and families. Sarah and Morrison found a table near the back where they could watch the entrance while staying relatively hidden. At exactly 3 p.m., a young woman with dark hair entered the shop and looked around nervously. "That's Emily," Morrison whispered. Sarah studied the young woman and immediately saw the family resemblance. Emily had her father's intelligent eyes and determined expression, but there was also a wariness that spoke of someone who had learned not to trust easily. Emily spotted her father and approached their table cautiously. "Dad, what's this about? You look terrible." Morrison stood slowly, favoring his injured shoulder. "Emily, I need you to listen very carefully. I'm in serious danger, and by meeting me here, you might be too." Emily's expression shifted from concern to alarm. "What kind of danger?" "Dad, you're scaring me." "Sit down," Morrison said gently. "I need to explain everything, and we don't have much time." As Emily took a seat, Sarah noticed a black SUV pulling up across the street from the ice cream shop. Her heart began to race as she recognized the vehicle type from the night before. "James," she whispered urgently, "we have company." Morrison followed her gaze and immediately tensed. "Emily, did anyone follow you here? Did you tell anyone about our meeting?" "No, of course not. Why would I?" Emily looked back and forth between her father and Sarah, clearly confused and increasingly frightened. Two men in dark suits got out of the SUV and began walking toward the ice cream shop. They moved with the kind of purposeful stride that meant they weren't there for dessert. "We need to leave now," Morrison said, standing up. "Emily, do you have the envelope I gave you?" Emily fumbled in her backpack and pulled out a manila envelope. "This? Dad, what's in here?" "Evidence of a conspiracy that could get us all killed if we don't handle it correctly." Morrison took the envelope and tucked it inside his jacket. "Sarah, which way is the back exit?" "Through the kitchen, but we'll have to move fast." The men in suits had entered the shop and were scanning the crowd. Sarah could see the moment when one of them spotted Morrison. The man reached inside his jacket, and Sarah knew they were out of time. "Run," Morrison said simply. What happened next was chaos. Morrison pushed Emily toward the back of the shop while Sarah cleared a path through the crowded restaurant. Customers began screaming as they realized something was wrong, and Sarah heard shouts from behind them as the men tried to follow. They burst through the kitchen doors, startling the staff, and headed for the service exit. Emily was keeping up well despite her obvious terror, and Morrison was moving faster than Sarah would have expected given his injuries. They emerged into an alley behind the shopping center just as Sarah heard gunshots from inside the building. The men weren't trying to be subtle anymore, which meant they were either desperate or no longer cared about witnesses. "My car is 2 blocks away," Emily said, breathing hard. Blue Honda Civic in the university parking lot. They ran through residential streets, using trees and parked cars for cover. Sarah's mind was racing as she tried to process what had just happened. How had their hunters found them so quickly? Had they been watching Emily? Or was there some other way they had been tracked? When they reached Emily's car, Morrison immediately checked the envelope to make sure the documents were intact. Sarah could see dozens of pages, some typed reports, and others that looked like photographs and technical diagrams. "Dad, I need you to tell me what's happening right now," Emily said as she started the car. "Who were those men? Why were they shooting?" As they drove away from the university, Morrison explained everything to his daughter. The conspiracy, the evidence, Lieutenant Commander Park's death, and the danger they were all in now. Emily listened in stunned silence, occasionally glancing at Sarah as if seeking confirmation that this was really happening. "So, those documents I've been keeping in my apartment, they could start a war?" Emily finally asked. "Or prevent one," Morrison replied. "Emily, I know this is overwhelming, but I need you to understand something. These people will kill all of us if they think it will protect their secret. We can't go home, we can't contact our friends, and we can't trust anyone in official channels until we know who else might be involved." Emily pulled into a parking lot behind a grocery store and turned off the engine. "What do we do now?" Sarah had been thinking about the same question. "We need to find Agent Walsh at the FBI, but we have to assume that our phones are being monitored and that we're being tracked somehow. We need a safe way to make contact." Morrison was examining the documents more carefully now, and his expression was grim. "These are worse than I thought." Hawthorne wasn't just selling submarine sonar technology. He was providing detailed intelligence on naval movements, patrol schedules, even information about nuclear submarine deployments. "What does that mean?" Emily asked. "It means that if a foreign power wanted to attack American naval assets, they would know exactly when and where to strike for maximum effect. This isn't just espionage, it's preparation for war." Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on all of them. They weren't just fighting for their own lives anymore. They were potentially the only things standing between the country and a devastating military attack. "Agent Walsh," Sarah said. "How do we reach her safely?" Morrison thought for a moment. "Jennifer Walsh and I served together 10 years ago. She left the Navy to join the FBI, but we stayed in touch occasionally. She's one of the few people in law enforcement that I trust completely. But if we call her directly, won't that tip off whoever is monitoring communications? Not if we're smart about it. Walsh has a secure communication protocol that we use for sensitive Navy-FBI cooperation. If I can get to a secure terminal at a federal building, I can send her a message that will be encrypted and untraceable." Emily looked back and forth between them. "A federal building? Dad, won't those be the most dangerous places for us right now?" Morrison smiled grimly. "Sometimes the most dangerous place is also the safest. Federal buildings have security that even corrupt Navy officials can't easily bypass. And Walsh will know how to arrange a secure meeting." They spent the next hour driving through the city, making sure they weren't being followed while Morrison explained his plan. They would go to the federal building downtown during the busy afternoon period when hundreds of people were coming and going. Morrison would use his military credentials to access a secure terminal, while Sarah and Emily waited in the public areas. It was risky, but they all agreed it was their best option. As they drove toward downtown Seattle, Sarah found herself thinking about how much her life had changed in just 24 hours. Yesterday, she had been a small-town doctor with a quiet, predictable routine. Today, she was part of a conspiracy that could affect the safety of the entire Pacific Fleet. But, despite the danger, she didn't regret her choices. Sometimes doing the right thing meant accepting risks that would have seemed impossible under normal circumstances. And sometimes ordinary people had to step up and become heroes whether they wanted to or not. As the federal building came into view, Sarah knew that the next few hours would determine not just their fate, but possibly the fate of thousands of military personnel whose lives depended on the security of American naval operations. The evidence in Morrison's jacket could prevent a catastrophe, but only if they could get it to the right people before their hunters caught up with them. The game was far from over, and the stakes had never been higher. The federal building's lobby was exactly what Morrison had hoped for: busy, well-secured, and filled with people going about their daily business. Sarah watched nervously as Morrison approached the security checkpoint, his military ID in hand. After everything they had been through, walking into a government building felt like walking into a trap. Remember, Morrison had told them in the car, "If something goes wrong, don't try to help me. Get the evidence to Agent Walsh by any means necessary." Emily stayed close to Sarah as they found seats in the public waiting area. The young woman had been remarkably calm considering everything that had happened, but Sarah could see the strain in her eyes. Learning that your father was being hunted by killers would be traumatic for anyone, but Emily seemed to be handling it with the same kind of focused determination she had inherited from Morrison. "How long should this take?" Emily whispered. "Your father said 20 minutes to access a secure terminal and send a message. Then, we wait for Agent Walsh to respond." Through the lobby's large windows, Sarah kept scanning the street for black SUVs or anyone who looked like they might be surveillance. So far, everything seemed normal, but she had learned not to trust appearances. Their hunters had found them at the ice cream shop somehow, which meant they were dealing with people who had significant resources and capabilities. Inside the secure area of the building, Morrison was using his Admiral credentials to access a classified communication system. The message he sent to Agent Walsh was brief but specific. "Jennifer, this is James Morrison. Code Blue situation. Need immediate secure meeting. Have evidence of major security breach involving naval intelligence. Lives at risk. Respond on this channel only." Code Blue was a signal they had established years ago during a joint operation, indicating maximum urgency and the highest level of operational security. If Walsh remembered their protocols, she would respond within the hour and arrange a meeting location that would be safe for all of them. Back in the lobby, Sarah noticed a commotion near the main entrance. Two security guards were checking IDs more carefully than before, and she could see them talking into their radios. Her heart started racing as she realized they might have been found again. "Emily," she whispered, "we need to move toward the back of the building." Now, Emily followed without question as Sarah led them deeper into the lobby, toward the elevators and secondary exits. They had been sitting for only 15 minutes, but Sarah's instincts were telling her that they had stayed in one place too long. Her fears were confirmed when she saw three men in suits enter the lobby and immediately begin scanning the crowd. They moved with the same purposeful efficiency she had seen at the ice cream shop, and one of them was speaking quietly into a cell phone. "They found us again," Emily said, her voice tight with fear. Sarah was thinking quickly. Morrison was still upstairs in the secure area, probably unaware of the danger developing in the lobby. If they ran now, they might escape, but Morrison would be trapped. If they stayed, they would all be caught. "Emily, I need you to do exactly what I tell you," Sarah said quietly. "Go to the elevators and take the next one up to the third floor. Find your father and Tell him to use whatever alternate exit this building has. Don't wait for me. What about you? I'm going to create a distraction to give you time to warn him." Emily looked like she wanted to argue, but she could see the determination in Sarah's face. "Sarah, you don't have to do this. You could just walk away." Sarah thought about Lieutenant Commander Park and the 37 sailors who had died to protect Hawthorne's secret. She thought about all the military personnel whose lives could be at risk if the conspiracy wasn't exposed. "Yes, I do have to do this." Emily squeezed Sarah's hand quickly and then headed for the elevators. Sarah waited until she saw Emily get on an elevator before putting her plan into action. She walked directly toward the security checkpoint, knowing that the men hunting them would be watching for people trying to leave. When she was about 20 feet from the main entrance, she suddenly collapsed to the floor, clutching her chest and gasping for breath. "Help!" she called out loudly. "I think I'm having a heart attack." The effect was immediate and dramatic. Security guards rushed to her aid, and within seconds she was surrounded by concerned federal employees and visitors. The three men in suits found themselves trapped in a crowd of people focused on the medical emergency, unable to move freely without drawing attention to themselves. Sarah continued her performance, describing chest pain and shortness of breath while secretly watching for any sign that Morrison and Emily had escaped. The security guards called for paramedics, and soon the lobby was filled with emergency personnel. One of the men in suits tried to push through the crowd toward the elevators, but a security guard stopped him. "Sir, we need to keep this area clear for the medical personnel." Sarah saw her opportunity. Still playing the role of a heart attack victim, she grabbed the security guard's arm. "Those men," she whispered, pointing toward the suits. "They were following me. I think they want to hurt me." The security guard looked at the men with new suspicion. In a federal building, any threat was taken seriously. Within minutes, the three men found themselves being questioned by federal security while Sarah was loaded onto a stretcher and wheeled toward the emergency exit. As soon as they were outside the building, Sarah sat up on the stretcher and told the paramedics she was feeling much better. "I think it was just anxiety," she said. "All the stress at work lately." The paramedics were reluctant to let her go without a proper examination, but Sarah insisted she didn't need to go to the hospital. She signed a release form and slipped away into the crowd of emergency vehicles. Morrison's encrypted phone was buzzing in her pocket. He had given it to her before going upstairs, knowing that she might need to communicate with Agent Walsh if something went wrong. Sarah found a quiet spot in a nearby coffee shop and checked the message. "Morrison, this is Walsh. Received your code blue. Meet me at the location where we had coffee after the tsunami relief briefing in 2018. 1 hour. Come alone and bring everything." Sarah remembered Morrison mentioning that he and Agent Walsh had worked together on various operations over the years. The reference to a coffee meeting after a tsunami relief briefing was obviously a coded location that only Walsh and Morrison would understand. She sent a quick response. "Unable to come alone. Have witnesses who need protection. 3 people total, all essential to operation." The response came back within minutes. "Understood. Location can accommodate. 1 hour." Sarah left the coffee shop and began walking through downtown Seattle, constantly checking for surveillance. She needed to find Morrison and Emily, but she also had to assume that their hunters were still looking for them. The distraction at the federal building had bought them time, but not much. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Sarah, this is Emily. Dad got your message from Agent Walsh. We're safe, and we'll meet you at the location. Dad says you saved our lives." Sarah felt a surge of relief. Her plan had worked, and now they were finally going to get the evidence to someone who could act on it. But she also knew that the most dangerous part of their mission was still ahead of them. Once Agent Walsh had the documents, the real work would begin. The meeting location turned out to be a small coffee shop in Pioneer Square, an area that was busy enough to provide cover, but also had enough open space to detect surveillance. Sarah arrived first and chose a table near the back where she could watch both the entrance and the emergency exit. Morrison and Emily arrived 10 minutes later, followed shortly by a woman in her 40s with short blonde hair and the kind of alert, professional bearing that suggested law enforcement. Agent Jennifer Walsh looked exactly like what Sarah had imagined. Competent, experienced, and not someone who would be easily intimidated. "Admiral Morrison," Walsh said as she joined them at the table. "When I got your message, I hoped you were being overly cautious. But looking at you, I can see that wasn't the case." Morrison was still favoring his injured shoulder, and the stress of the past 2 days was evident in his face. "Jennifer, we have a problem that goes all the way to the top of the Navy's command structure. Admiral Richard Hawthorne has been selling classified submarine intelligence to foreign agents." Walsh's expression didn't change, but Sarah could see her processing the implications. "That's a serious accusation, James. I hope you have serious evidence." Morrison placed the manila envelope on the table. "Bank records, communication intercepts, technical specifications, photographs. Everything you need to build a case that will put Hawthorne away for the rest of his life." As Walsh examined the documents, her expression grew increasingly grim. "James, this is worse than you know. We've been investigating unusual intelligence patterns in the Pacific Fleet for months. This explains everything we've been seeing." "What kind of patterns?" Emily asked. "Chinese naval movements that seem to anticipate our submarine patrols. Technical capabilities that they shouldn't have had access to. We knew there was a leak, but we couldn't locate the source." Sarah felt a chill as she understood what Walsh was saying. The intelligence theft wasn't just theoretical. It was already being used against American forces. "That's right," Walsh confirmed. "And if these documents are authentic, they show that the situation is far worse than we realized." Hawthorne wasn't just selling historical intelligence. He was providing real-time information about ongoing operations. Morrison leaned forward. "Jennifer, there's something else you need to know. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Park discovered the initial evidence of this conspiracy. She died in what was ruled a training accident 2 weeks ago." Walsh's expression hardened. "Along with her entire crew. 37 people. You investigated the accident. We investigated the possibility that it wasn't an accident. But we couldn't prove anything conclusive. With these documents, though, we might be able to establish a pattern of elimination." Sarah watched as Agent Walsh continued to study the evidence. She could see the federal agent putting together a case in her mind, connecting evidence to suspects to probable crimes. This was what they had been risking their lives for, getting the right information to the right person who could act on it. "Agent Walsh," Sarah said, "what happens to us now? The people hunting Admiral Morrison know that we helped him. They'll never stop looking for us." Walsh closed the envelope and looked at each of them seriously. "Dr. Chun, you're right to be concerned. But if we move fast enough, we can roll up this entire conspiracy before they have time to eliminate witnesses." "James, how confident are you in this evidence?" "Completely confident. I verified every document personally." "Then we move tonight. I'm going to coordinate with Navy Criminal Investigative Service to arrest Hawthorne and his known associates simultaneously. Once they're in custody, the immediate threat to your safety should be reduced." Emily looked uncertain. "Should be? Miss Morrison, I won't lie to you. Conspiracies like this usually have tentacles that extend beyond the obvious players. There might be other people involved who we haven't identified yet. But your father has given us the best chance we've had to break this case wide open." Over the next hour, Agent Walsh coordinated with multiple law enforcement agencies to plan the arrests. Sarah listened as the federal agent arranged for NCIS agents to move against Admiral Hawthorne at his home, while FBI teams would simultaneously arrest his known contacts and associates. "What about the foreign agents?" Morrison asked. "The people he was selling intelligence to." "That's going to be more complicated," Walsh admitted. "Some of them have diplomatic immunity, others have already left the country. But cutting off their source of information is the most important thing right now." As evening approached, Walsh arranged for Sarah, Morrison, and Emily to stay in a safe house while the arrests were carried out. The location was a nondescript apartment in a residential neighborhood, staffed by federal marshals who specialized in witness protection. "This should only be temporary," Walsh assured them. Once Hawthorne is in custody and we've secured all the evidence, you should be able to return to your normal lives. Sarah wasn't sure she believed that completely, but she was grateful for any kind of safety after the terror of the past 2 days. As they settled into the safe house, she found herself thinking about her clinic, her patients, and the quiet life she had been living before Admiral Morrison crashed into her world. Around midnight, Agent Walsh called with news. "We got him. Hawthorne is in federal custody, along with 4 associates. We also recovered additional evidence from his home and office that corroborates everything in your documents." Morrison closed his eyes in relief. "What about the people who were hunting us?" 3 of them were arrested at the federal building this afternoon, thanks to Dr. Chen's quick thinking. We're still looking for others, but the immediate threat appears to be neutralized. Sarah felt a weight lifting from her shoulders that she hadn't even realized she was carrying. For the first time in 2 days, she allowed herself to think about what came next instead of just how to survive the next few hours. "Agent Walsh," she said, "what happens to the intelligence that was already sold? Can that damage be contained? We're working with the Navy to change patrol schedules, update security protocols, and modify any operations that might have been compromised. It'll be expensive and complicated, but we can minimize the ongoing damage." Emily had been quiet during most of the call, but now she spoke up. "What about Lieutenant Commander Park and her crew? Will there be justice for them? If we can prove that Hawthorne ordered their deaths to protect his conspiracy, he'll be charged with murder in addition to espionage. Dr. Chen's testimony about what your father told her could be crucial in establishing his motive for eliminating Park." Sarah realized that her involvement in this case was far from over. She would need to testify in federal court, possibly in multiple trials, as the full scope of the conspiracy was investigated and prosecuted. But, for the first time, that prospect didn't terrify her. She would be helping to ensure that justice was served for 37 sailors who had died protecting their country. 3 months later, Sarah stood outside the federal courthouse in Seattle, having just finished her testimony in Admiral Hawthorne's espionage trial. The evidence had been overwhelming, and Hawthorne had been convicted on all charges. He would spend the rest of his life in federal prison. Morrison approached her on the courthouse steps, walking without the limp that had marked the early days of their acquaintance. His shoulder had healed completely, and he looked healthier than she had ever seen him. "How are you doing, Sarah?" he asked. "Better than I expected," she replied honestly. "My clinic is busier than ever, actually. Apparently, being involved in a major espionage case is good for business. People trust a doctor who's willing to risk her life to do the right thing." Morrison smiled. "And Emily? How is she handling everything?" Sarah looked toward the courthouse entrance, where Emily was emerging with Agent Walsh. The young woman had become a key witness in the case, and her testimony about her father's character had been moving and powerful. "She's proud of you, James. What you did took courage, and it saved lives. She sees that now." Morrison's expression was thoughtful. "I spent so many years focused on my career, on climbing the ladder, that I forgot what really mattered. It took a conspiracy and a car crash to remind me that protecting people is more important than protecting my position." Emily joined them, linking her arm through her father's. The relationship between father and daughter had been rebuilt during the long months of investigation and trial preparation. They had found their way back to each other through shared purpose and mutual respect. "Dr. Chen," Emily said, "I wanted to thank you again for everything you did. If you hadn't helped my father that night, none of this would have been possible." Sarah thought about that night, about the choice she had made to help a wounded stranger, and about all the consequences that had flowed from that single decision. Her life had been turned upside down, she had faced mortal danger, and she had been forced to find reserves of courage she hadn't known she possessed. "Emily, I think your father and I helped each other. Sometimes the right choice isn't the safe choice, but it's still the only choice you can live with." Agent Walsh approached their group, looking satisfied with the day's proceedings. "Dr. Chun, Admiral Morrison, I wanted you to know that the Navy has implemented new security protocols based on what we learned from this investigation. The kind of intelligence theft that Hawthorne carried out should be much more difficult in the future." And Lieutenant Commander Park Morrison asked, "Her name has been added to the memorial for sailors who died in the line of duty. The Navy is also establishing a new intelligence security division in her honor." Her sacrifice wasn't meaningless. As they walked away from the courthouse together, Sarah reflected on the strange journey that had brought them all to this point. A routine evening at her clinic had become a fight for national security. A wounded stranger had become a trusted friend. A simple act of medical compassion had helped prevent what could have been a catastrophic attack on American naval forces. 6 months later, Sarah received a letter from the Navy Department informing her that she was being awarded the Navy Distinguished Public Service Award for her role in exposing the conspiracy. The ceremony would be held at the Pentagon, with Admiral Morrison presenting the award. As she prepared for the trip to Washington, Sarah thought about how much her life had changed. Her clinic was thriving. She had developed a deeper sense of purpose in her work, and she had proven to herself that she was capable of far more courage than she had ever imagined. But perhaps most importantly, she had learned that ordinary people could make an extraordinary difference when they chose to act on their principles rather than their fears. The night she found Admiral Morrison bleeding in his crashed car, she had made a choice to help a stranger in need. That choice had led to justice for 37 murdered sailors, the prevention of a potentially devastating intelligence breach, and the rebuilding of a broken relationship between a father and daughter. Sometimes, Sarah realized, saving one life could end up saving many more. And sometimes, the most important choice you ever make is the one you make without thinking, guided only by your sense of what's right. The black SUVs that had once terrified her were gone, replaced by the knowledge that she had helped make her country safer and more secure. And that was a feeling worth more than all the quiet evenings and predictable routine she had given up to get it. As Sarah boarded the plane to Washington for her award ceremony, she smiled at the thought that the best decisions in life were often the ones that scared you the most. And she was grateful that when the moment came to choose between safety and service, she had found the courage to choose service. The story that had begun with a car crash in the rain had ended with justice served and honor restored. And Dr. Sarah Chun had learned that sometimes ordinary heroes are exactly what the world needs most.